More Gospel, chapter 12. Sex, part 2. That is why a man leaves father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. Genesis 2:24. God made sexuality for life and for love. The life part is obvious. If you were looking for the sexual organs in a biology book, you would find them in the chapter on the reproductive system. Why? Because that is the function of those organs. That's what they do. But many people in our society don't want to reproduce. They want the pleasure of sex, but not the babies. So they use some sort of contraception or abortion. They use their power to frustrate God's intended purpose for sexuality. To go directly against God's will in something as good, holy, and powerful as sex is obviously very wrong. To use sex properly, there must always be an openness to life. The couple must never do anything to close that possibility of new life. Each act of sexuality must also be an act of love. God says that a man must cling to his wife. He doesn't say wives or fiancé or girlfriend or prostitute. One husband and one wife until death do they part. That's an integral part of God's plan for sexuality. True love is first expressed in the marriage vows, where respect and faithfulness are pledged. Once the indissoluble bond of love is formed by an act of their wills, then the body language of complete self-giving in sexuality is very appropriate. It doesn't make sense to go all the way sexually if you haven't pledged unconditional love in every other area of life. Premarital sex is body language telling a very big lie. Marriage is the appropriate place for children, wherein they can be protected and nurtured by father and mother. God wants the best for each new life, and the best place to receive love is in the union of a man and woman in matrimony. So any use of our sexuality outside of this sacred union is not according to God's plan. The two become one flesh in marriage sexuality, and that's how God intended for children to come into the world. Fornication could produce a baby, but that's not the ideal situation, because the parents are not committed to each other for life. Rape could also produce a baby, but it's certainly not an act of love. Modern ingenuity has enabled technology to make test tube babies in the lab by combining sperm and egg taken from spouses or from others. Creating human life in the lab is very wrong for several reasons. Man plays God and becomes the arbiter of life. The process degrades the human dignity of each person, as humans become a product from the assembly line instead of a child of God chosen to come into existence by God's choice. When life is conceived outside the mother's womb, there is great possibility of tampering and abusing the process, which again is an assault on human dignity. I want to make clear that every human being is of equal human dignity, regardless of how they came into being. Marital intercourse, fornication, rape, and in vitro fertilization can all produce a baby of equal human dignity, but only marital intercourse is according to the plan of God, and the other actions are wrong. Let me summarize what God is teaching us about sex in this passage from Genesis. God made us male and female, so sex must always be heterosexual. He wants us to multiply, so sex must always be open to life. Man is supposed to cling to his wife, so sex must always be an expression of marital love. Becoming one flesh designates sexual intercourse as the acceptable means of reproduction and excludes any technological processes that would replace intercourse. Hopefully, this snapshot of sexuality will spark your interest in learning much more on the vast topic of Catholic sexual morality. The Catholic Church is the prophetic voice to the world in this subject area. The world has completely lost its way and desperately needs to listen to the wisdom of God as expressed through His Church if it is to find its way home and flourish.